What's going on, everybody? Welcome in to Blazers Uprise Live. We got a chill stream for tonight. I know last night's stream was popping after the game, so we will answer your questions for quite a bit tonight. We'll also talk about this positional battle a little bit more. You got Terry Stotts commenting on Harry Giles and his place in the rotation, and honestly, there wasn't really a whole much to get from it, but we'll still quote him and talk about his comments and talk about this positional battle. Hopefully you guys are having a good Monday. I've had a pretty good Monday myself, so hope it's the same for you. Yeah, we'll get into that in a little bit. We can take questions now. Is there anything like I'm forgetting to say with the intro? The intro felt kind of short. It was weird. It's a weird, man. I like to flow and warm up with the intro, but honestly, there's really not much to plug. Oh yeah, you gotta ban Isaac for that 100%.
I got you.
But so yeah, we'll take your guys' questions. I did drop the mailbag today. If you haven't watched it, feel free to watch it whenever. And leave a question on that too if you want to include it in the mailbag video. If not, we can take your questions right off the bat. I know some people were upset that we were answering their questions last night, so I want to make sure that we get to them. So yeah, it's going to be a pretty chill stream, probably a little shorter than usual, but we're streaming Wednesday after the Nuggets game. We're streaming Thursday as usual, and then we're streaming Friday, so we're streaming a bunch. No need to really drag things out. What's up, Jackson, FaZe King, Marco, Beavis, Dave? I'm not giving Isaac what's up because he said Sco Blazers, and that's terrible. I don't Duck fans, man. That's corny, I think. But yeah, how's everybody doing tonight? I mean, nobody's really asking questions, so we can actually just jump into this if you want.
Yeah, sounds good.
All right, so Terry Stotts commented on Harry Giles' place in the rotation. Let me pull it up here. And this is basically what he said in reference to a question asking about Harry Giles. He said, I've been really pleased with the way Giles has played. He's scoring the ball well. He's rebounding the ball well. He's playing with a lot of energy. So that's been very encouraging. That being said, obviously Nurkic is our starting center. Melo is our backup four. Enes Kanter took us to the Western Conference Finals as a starting center, so he's going to have to take advantage of the opportunities when they come his way. I think it's a little early to be talking about minutes and rotations, but I really like who we have playing in those positions right now. He said a little bit more, but that's basically the gist of his comments is Harry Giles looks really good. We have players like, that we have veteran players in the lineup, and we like our veteran players. He didn't say, like Giles isn't our backup center, or Giles is, I don't know. He didn't, I'm trying to come to a conclusion based off this, but it's really hard because this is basically your generic answer on, yeah, Giles looks really good and we really like all our other players too. You know what I mean? It doesn't really show that he's favoring anybody really to me.
See, I took the exact opposite out of this. I don't know if I'm just overanalyzing it, but to me, he's saying he has been thinking all along that Kanter was going to be the backup center, and now he's like, oh crap, Giles might make that decision look really bad, so of course I'm going to give him a chance. But I think he's basically saying that Kanter has already proven that he has done something with this with under Stotts, and that he
which
trusts
we all
him
know
to be the
yeah, we all know that. But he also said I think it's a little too early to be talking about minutes and rotations. We're only halfway through the preseason. I know it's only 4 games, but we're only halfway through the preseason, and if Ennis struggles opening night, maybe that leads to Kanter, or maybe that leads to Giles getting a chance. You know what I mean? I feel like, of course, he's basically just hyping up everybody. That's why I'm not taking anything from it, because Giles looks great, and Terry Stotts knows that, and he's pointing that out. But you don't want it to be something where you're hyping up Giles, if you're asked. Do you know what the question exactly was? Like the phrasing of the question?
No, I just read what you read off.
I assume he got asked, about Giles' place in the rotation. You don't want to hype up Giles and then not mention Ennis and make it sound like Giles is your guy at the backup center. That's
Well,
the thing when you're dealing with a bunch of like basketball players. Everybody has a little bit of an ego, and you're dealing with a really deep team. I feel like it's kind of hard to answer that question without potentially upsetting someone if you don't give credit to the other guys you have there. So that's why it's like this seems like he's not trying to step on anyone, not trying to to disappoint anyone with his comments. He's basically just saying positive things about everybody there.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't. I didn't get that at all. I thought it was a little more telling to me, especially since
Which
he
part
threw
exactly?
Mello he threw Mello into it too. So like, um, the fact that he said Mello was our backup four,
How is that
which
telling?
we all know. But like, I mean, he's basically telling you Nurk's our backup center, Mello's our backup four, and I feel like without saying it, he was like, I am expecting Kanter to be the backup five. Um, and Giles is going to get a few opportunities, but he's going to have to make the most of them if he's going to overtake him. And yeah, that's just how I read it, knowing
I mean, but that was
how
already
Stotts talks.
yeah, that was already assumed though. I don't know. I don't feel like that's really telling of anything. Like Giles' opportunities coming his way could be the next 2 games, could be the next. He's going to not get a chance for 10 games, or if he looks really good the next 2 games and Canner struggles, then Giles might get a chance on opening night, and if he makes the most of that opportunity, then maybe he gets a little bit more minutes. It could mean something like that. It could mean like he's going to get sporadic minutes for the first 10 games of the season because at the start of the regular season they want to count on the guys that they know they can count on. I feel like that could mean either way, so that's why it's not really telling to me.
See, I guess I put it this way. I felt like his comments made it sound like going into it, he had already like kind of determined what his rotation was, and of course you want to like somewhat plan for that, but like I don't think he was expecting to have this tough of a decision for for uh for Giles this quickly coming into the conversation of possibly being the full-time backup center. I think he was thinking it would be a little more gradual. So I think I just don't like going into training camp battle seemingly already set with your mind made up. So I'm hoping he does stay open to the fact that Giles could be, in fact, better than Kanter.
Yeah, I don't know, man. It's just like that's what I would expect him to say if he didn't have his mind made up. That's what I would expect him to say. That's the part for me where it's just like I'm not really. I don't know. I just feel like he's kind of saying things we already knew. He's kind of coming across kind of how I would expect him to, no matter if he had his mind made up or if he was like looking at it, Giles. I feel like he'd still reference, yeah, Ennis Kanter took us to a Western Conference Finals. He didn't say, he said Nurkic is our starting center, Melo is our backup four, but he didn't explicitly say Kanter is our backup five. He didn't say that. All he said was Kanter took us to a Western Conference Finals, which is a fact. So that's why it's like I feel like it would have been a little bit more telling if it's like Kanter is our backup center. But he didn't say that. He was more just crediting what Kanter has done for us in the past. So it's like, I don't know. I guess I get how you take a little bit more out of that. It's just, man, with the way like Terry Stotts talks too, he's a guy that like doesn't try and upset anybody. You know what I mean? He doesn't try and ever throw his players under the bus. Always tries to say good things about the players. If the players struggle, he doesn't call them out. It's the typical, oh, we just missed shots. You know what I mean? So I don't know. This just seems on par with the course for that. What who do you guys agree with on that, chat? I'm curious. What did you take out of those comments? Do you think they're telling, or do you think it doesn't really mean much? Those comments. I'm curious to see what you guys say.
Just knowing how stubborn Stotts has been, sometimes like last year we even saw it where a guy like Nas doesn't get much of an opportunity, even though he seemingly does fine in the minutes he got.
Yeah,
I just feel like I don't want to see that with Giles, especially I mean, I'm hoping I'm wrong. I hope you are right and I'm wrong here.
I mean, that's a factor, but that's pretty. I don't know. There's some differences in that comparison, considering Nas is a rookie, while Giles is a guy who's actually performed when he's gotten some playing time over the course of his first 2 years. And also, Giles is far, far better than Nas. You know what I mean? Like, far, far better. If not, imagine if Nas was doing this in the preseason, last year or even this season, everybody would be calling him the next Kawhi Leonard if he's putting up stats like this, if he was putting up performances like this. So that's, I don't know, that comparison, like, yes, he is definitely stubborn when it comes to young guys, so he could end up, not really giving Giles much of a chance. That's definitely a possibility, but also it's like he hasn't had a guy quite like Giles threatening a veteran in the rotation before, if that makes sense, So I'm curious to see how it plays itself out. It's just I feel like this is kind of a unique situation that we haven't really seen with Stotts, mostly because we haven't really had that sort of depth where a guy that's presumed as out of the rotation is actually this good. So this is like a new problem for Stotts that I've never really seen him have to deal with. So I'm curious as to, okay, were these comments telling is it just going to be Enes Kanter for the first 10 games, right? Or, is Stotts trying to put dressing on everything and, make, hype, not hype everybody up, but say nice things about everybody, and he might actually be considering playing Harry Giles, at least in some games, as the backup center, first big off the bench type of role.
Yeah, I just lost my train of thought. Sorry.
It's all good. It happens.
So, in the 2018-19 season, before Nurk got hurt, I was begging for Stotts to play Collins and Nurkic together. They played very limited minutes, and I felt like we played well in those minutes. I just wanted to see it in a more bigger sample size so we could see just if it would work or not before committing to Zach either at the 4 or the 5. And I feel like I'm hoping this year we play Giles a little bit with Nurk, because the passing that lineup opens up if you have Dame in there with both Giles and Nurkic. I just feel like that's something that we can really utilize different schemes, and there's nothing that lineup couldn't do offensive set wise. So I'd just really like to be creative with some of those lineups and see some really awesome players like that. I just don't know. I mean, obviously there's not going to be a lot of minutes at the 4 for Giles, but I'd like to see Stotts get creative and just do it for a little bit and try to run some unique sets that he hasn't run in the past.
Here's the problem with that, though. I do kind of agree, but Collins is a guy who 35% three-point shooter, shot threes and made enough of them to be respectable out there, where Giles has never made a three in his NBA career outside of the preseason. So, if you play a Giles with a Nurkic, who knows how Nurkic's three-point shooting develops, but he isn't a proven three-point shooter yet. You got two players out there that literally aren't proven three-point shooters, and then if you played a Derrick Jones Jr. at the small forward there, hopefully I'm encouraged by some of his shooting this preseason, how his shot looks, and hopefully Derrick Jones can be a shooter, but then you're kind of, the spacing gets a little limited there and makes things a little bit tougher.
This is the only reason why I would say it might be different with Giles, because he can put the ball on the floor like Collins can't. So I feel like even if he can't shoot, he can still maybe penetrate and get some of our guards open, which we haven't really had a guy who, I guess it's been since Batum, someone who could actually drive to the basket and kick it out to the guards off the dribble. There's guys who are good passers like a Nurkic, but he's not going to break someone down from the 3-point line and take it to the rim, So I feel like you can still play Giles in that spot where you would play Collins to shoot a 3. He might not shoot the 3, but he could drive and make something else happen other than a 3-pointer, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that if, you had another floor spacing big next to him where he had, where it's more of a threat. Whereas, I feel okay, these guards, their guys aren't going to leave them. The guys that are going to help on a Giles drive would be Nurkic's guy, just a big presence. And it would be like Nurkic's guy and maybe a guy like if Derek Jones Jr. is on the court, or maybe if Rodney Hood's on the court. You know what I mean? So that's the thing with that is like I think that functions better if he's the backup five, whereas he has Carmelo next to him, and maybe you stagger Nurkic with the bench unit to help the bench unit out and play like Nurkic and CJ with the bench, and then at the end of the first half you put Giles in as the center and keep CJ in the game, and Giles can make those plays. Maybe you have a Derek Jones Jr. Rocco Giles lineup where you have a cutter and a lob target like a Derek Jones Jr. who can also knock down the occasional three, and then you have shooters, whereas the floor is spread, making Giles a little bit more of a threat off the drive, making the defense collapse off guys they probably shouldn't be collapsing off of. I don't know. It's just with two bigs that can't shoot, like I see what you're saying. I agree that would be nice to have for our guards. It's just like not going to be as effective if you have a big that's not a proven 3-point shooter that you don't necessarily have to respect yet. If Nurkic can hit threes like consistently, different story. We just haven't seen it consistently enough to be able to trust that. So that's going to be like a big development this season is if Nurkic can hit threes, because then I think a Giles Nurkic front court is a lot more viable in terms of a fit.
Yeah, the other thing I'll say to that is, I mean, that's kind of like our old offense, though. Like, if you have, like, more creative things there, you don't have to just have guys shooting at the perimeter. So, like, what if you had, like, a Nurk and Giles pick and roll with, like, CJ, Dame, and Melo or something as the shooters, or Rocco, like, spacing the floor. And so you have Nurk as the roll man and Giles handling the ball and like setting up offense if anyone.
Yeah, they probably switch that though,
Yeah,
and they probably go under the screen on Giles, like because if Giles could like hit threes off the dribble, then that'd be really tough. That's what makes Jokic so good. But like, I like the idea. I like the creativity, but it's just like thinking about how they guard it. They probably either switch because it's too bigs, or the guy guarding Giles would just go under the screen since Giles hasn't like been able to hit that shot, and then that limits the penetration ability from that pick and roll. So I don't know.
Have Dame set the pick then.
See inverted stuff like that. See, you look at like Jokic Murray, where like Murray's setting the screen. That stuff works. I would love to see that. So like. But that's where it comes back where, like, okay, hopefully Nurkic can hit three so he can, like, space off of that and maybe be, like, a dive threat, just to keep that defender honest from clogging it up. Because, like, Giles can handle the ball enough and pass well enough where I think he could be that pick-and-roll ball handler. If you had, like, Dame as a pop option, they can't switch that. You know what I mean? They can't switch that because that's going to be a mismatch on Dame and that's going to be a mismatch on Giles. So, and that's what the Nuggets do. They set those screens and, like, get switches out of it, then exploit the mismatches. So, yeah, I mean, like, something like that would be very interesting. That's something that I like.
Honestly, I think Giles could develop a 3-point shot. Like I like his form in the mid range and stuff. But the problem is, man, if he's healthy and starts hitting threes at like a 35 to 40% clip, we're talking like all-star level player, not just like good big off the bench.
Yeah. I mean, you see why he was rated so highly in high school right now, you know? Yeah, I hope he can shoot threes. He should shoot more. I mean, he made one last night. His stroke looks good.
Yeah.
He just hasn't really shot him.
Confident, yeah.
But with like that skill set, I still think it works better as the center than as the four. If that makes sense. That skill set is super unique at the 5 where it's not quite as unique at the 4. Maybe his size would be what's more unique at the 4, being able to do things that a high level 4 can, but also be bigger than most 4s that are doing the things that Giles would provide. That would be like the uniqueness there. I just think his skill set works better at the 5, and then I like the consistency by having playmaking for 48 minutes a game from the center spot. That's another thing that Denver likes to do, and it's going to, we'll see how Bol is a passer. I don't know. Who's their backup center? Because I saw Bol wasn't really playing much in the preseason, so I don't know if it's going to be him or somebody else, but that's what they enjoyed having with Jokic and Plumlee. A lot of the passes that Jokic made and a lot of the ways they ran the offense through Jokic, they could actually do similar things with Plumlee. So with like Nurkic and Giles, that's where I think like, man, he probably... maybe you could run some of them together, but his best role on this team, I think he'd make the most impact as a backup 5. It's just tough, man. See, this is the problem you said we were gonna have with how are we gonna get minutes for everybody, man? And now it's like you got Giles, where I like, okay, Giles probably won't be in the rotation. Now he's making a case for 20 minutes a game at least, just based off 2 preseason. Like he just looks phenomenal. We knew he was talented, but he looks great.
I mean, I'm starting to believe him that he's the healthiest he's been in a long time. So, I mean, because he had problems. Was it his senior year in high school? He blew out his knee.
Yeah, his sophomore and his senior season.
Yeah, so like he barely played much in high school either. So yeah, it'd be exciting to see if he's able to play a full season and provide that role for us. Because I think at some point we've seen this in previous years where we don't bring it back an Ed Davis because we feel like Zach Collins can step up and take that role. But this is almost like magnified to where like it's like obvious like to everyone that at some point probably Giles, if he continues to play like this, would obviously beat out Kanter and should be getting those minutes. So it makes Kanter expendable. So I don't know if they would leave him on the team or if they would move him to fill another spot.
Kanter didn't seem to
injury problems. Yeah.
Kanter. See, this is the good thing with having like Kanter instead of Whiteside, though. Whiteside would be pissed if he wasn't playing, whereas Kanter, like he kind of had this happen last year with like a guy like Robert Williams playing over him in Boston, and he didn't really cause any problems. He's still a good teammate. So like, and it's not like Kanter would be sitting on the bench behind a like Myers Leonard type who probably doesn't deserve to be playing ahead of him. Like you got this young guy with a ton of talent. Like I feel like Kanter could understand that. But yes, if Giles like really steps in and takes over that backup center role, I think it increases the chance there's a trade at the deadline, because that kind of makes Kanter expendable. It kind of makes Collins expendable, as our young project big. Like if we think we can bring Giles back the following season, that's the thing. Maybe we could with like we might need our full mid-level exception or whatnot, but I think we would try to. But he would make those guys expendable, and that's like 11 million in salary, and then maybe you package those 2 guys with a Rodney Hood and stay under the tax, and you go out and get an upgrade on the wing, and you have your backup bigs with like a Melo and a Giles. I don't know, like that's the thing, is like the better Giles does, since he's only on a minimum contract, you don't really have to pay him, and he makes Kanter more expendable. Kanter is actually a decent bit of salary that you can use in trades. I feel like it would make a trade a little bit more likely, not necessarily likely in general, because I don't think it's likely we really make any sort of trade this season, but I think the better Giles plays, the more likely it is that we would end up making a move.
Yeah, I don't know about trading Collins though, because like there is a realistic shot that we could not retain Giles if he plays well this year. So I like the fact that Collins is retainable no matter what happens.
Yeah, but it wouldn't have to include Collins necessarily. It could be like Kanter and Hood for like a, probably not Kelly Oubre, but Kelly Oubre makes like 14.5 million, and Kanter plus Hood is about 15.5 million. So you could trade those guys and then sign like a buyout guy and stay under the luxury tax, because this team is going to try and stay under the luxury tax a little bit. They're going to try and stay under the luxury tax no matter what. So that's what limits the trades this year. So, like, yeah, Collins is an interesting case if Giles plays well. I think they'll try and keep him. He doesn't really have much trade value, especially in a contract year. So I agree with you. But he just Kanter being traded goes up. And
I will say this. If at some point they determine that Collins is not going to be part of their long-term plan, we should absolutely trade him and try to get like a Plumlee type trade for him, which we got back Nurkic in a first round pick. And Collins isn't going to get that kind of return. But I don't want to be in a situation where we re-sign Giles next summer and then say like, oh, well, we re-signed Giles, we didn't have to sign Collins, and then he just walks for nothing and we let him go after, trading up to number 10 and wasting two first round picks to go up to get him. So like if we determine that Zach just is not going to be healthy enough or isn't ever going to be the right fit on this roster, I think we should absolutely move him. But I don't see that happening this year. I think if anything, it's going to keep his value down, so we could possibly sign him to a much cheaper deal moving forward.
Yeah.
The fact that he's going to be pretty much out of the rotation this year.
And long term, Zach and Giles is an intriguing pairing at the backup 4 and 5 because like Melo is not going to play forever, right? You have our starting 4 for I think the next 2 years, potentially longer, and Rocco, and you have Nurkic, obviously our long term starting center. Giles and Collins' skill sets are an intriguing mesh because both can protect the rim a bit. Both have decent foot speed that they could guard most fours in the league, I think. And then Giles can pass the ball, like skilled like that, can handle the ball. Whereas Collins can't do that, but Collins can shoot threes, right? And maybe Giles will be able to shoot threes in the future. Maybe right now, maybe you just needed a place where that encouraged more threes, which we all know Portland encourages threes from pretty much anybody. So I don't know, like just on both sides of the floor, I think it's an intriguing fit, and I think they mesh really well together.
Yeah, because just to mention this, so Kanter is in the last year of his deal, so I'd assume he wouldn't be back in that scenario. And then Melo is obviously on a 1-year deal, so who knows? I mean, he could just keep signing 1-year deals with us.
Yeah, but I mean, Melo's going to decline at some point.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like the dude's going to be 37 before the end of the season, right? Let me look that up. I'm kind of curious when exactly he turns 37. But dude, at 37, like you're going to decline.
A realistic scenario where we somehow keep Giles for the mid-level exception, and then re-sign Collins using bird rights, re-sign Trent using bird rights. And that's our team moving forward, where we have, Dame CJ, Derek Jones Jr., Rocco, and Nurk as the starters. And then Trent, Hood, Giles, and Collins as the backup. I mean, that's still a loaded team, even if you lost Melo and Kanter off that roster. So, and it doesn't make it so those guys can't be back. We'd actually have early bird rights on both Melo and Kanter, so we could offer them up to like $10 million without, going into what we can offer Giles.
Yeah, but we won't do that.
I know we won't do that. I'm just saying we won't be stuck in a situation like the 2019 offseason where we had to basically choose between Hood, Kanter, and Curry, who we're going to pursue first. There is a way to keep basically everyone if we wanted to going forward.
Yeah, but it does become an issue like, okay, Trent's going to get an extension next offseason. Yeah. So it's going to become like we're not going to, if we, well, I assume we're going to pay the tax next season. That's why we're trying to dodge it this season. It's going to become more of staying under the tax apron so we could use our full mid-level exception. Like that's the thing. Like to keep, if Giles balls out, we're probably going to need our full mid-level exception to keep him, right? And you're talking about a Trent extension and like Dame's extension. I don't know if it kicks in next year. It kicks in next year, right? Dame's extension. And Dame's extension is very pricey. And yeah, so salary next year with using our full mid-level exception is going to be tough. Like even if we let Melo and Kanter walk, just, hopefully Trent doesn't get 20 million plus a year or something crazy like that, because that would leave us with some hard decisions. I think like I want, just based on what I've seen, based on how talented Giles is, I want him back next year with our mid-level, right? And I think he just, as a backup center, he's perfect. He's really talented, and everybody talks about, Portland Trailblazers don't have a future. Blazer fans don't say that, but like fans on the outside say that. Bro, if you're talking about having Derek Jones Jr., who's only 23 right now, he does turn 24 in a couple months, but 23 years old. You got Gary Trent Jr. who's 21 years old. You got Anthony Simons, who I still like as a developmental piece. If you have Harry Giles locked up long term, if you have Zach Collins locked up, if he resigns,
Nasir Little, 4-year deal.
Yeah, like dude, that combination of young players, like a lot of those young guys, like Gary Trent Jr., Derek Jones, and Harry Giles, are rotation level pieces on a good team already. So that's the thing. Like those guys are already like can play for a contender off the bench. If you got Gary Trent Jr., Harry Giles, like off the bench, that's a good bench, just given how Giles' talent level and how he's just going to keep improving. He's getting healthier. He's looked great. And then Gary Trent Jr. could be one of the best sixth men in the NBA this year, but they're both like 21, 22 years old. Let me look up Giles' age because I'm blanking on it. Giles is 22 years old. Like that, we're pretty set if we have those guys locked up.
And Nurk is only 26, I think. So
yeah.
It's not like he's old too. Like he kind of fits with either, the older crowd or the younger crowd.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So that's the thing is like that. I like that. I like, having guys where it would be nice to have guys locked up long term and just be like, okay, they're already good enough to potentially help us win a championship now, but they should only continue to get better. They're not going to decline because they're literally 22, 23, 24 years old and they're just 26. Like, that's nice to have next to Dame and CJ. Players that fit them on the court, players that are young, because that's the thing. Everybody talks about timeline, right? Oh, we need players that fit Dame's timeline. We don't need young guys. We need players that fit Dame's timeline. But sometimes guys that are 22 are just as good as guys that are 28, right? Giles, I think, is as good of an option as Kanter, right? But Giles' age doesn't fit the Lillard timeline, but his talent level is just as good as pretty much anybody you could get out there to be the backup center. Mm-hmm. So I'd rather have the young guy, even though the age doesn't fit the timeline. He's young, but he's just as good as the veteran here. So that's the thing. I'd rather have the young guy. People, I feel like, write some young players off sometimes. Not everybody, but I feel like there's people out there that are like, oh, we don't need a guy who's 22. We need a guy who's 28. No, we just need guys that are good. That's all. That's what we need.
Trevin brings up this is what Daryl Morey did wrong with Houston, and I completely agree with that. So they don't have any developmental players. They don't keep any of their first-round picks every year. They always trade them to get cap space and sign veterans that you know what you're getting out of them, but they don't have any chance to pop, or you don't have any kind of upside potential. Like, you're stuck to where you're at a certain level, and it almost worked if Chris Paul maybe doesn't get hurt. But like you see, if it doesn't work, you're stuck with a team now that doesn't have any like one to turn to be like, oh, well, at least we have this guy developing next to Harden, or it could be a player in a year or two or whatever. Like, they're kind of stuck having to sign a bunch of like Jeff Greens and, like players like that they're not going to increase their championship contender level. They're just going to be like that. Whereas if they would have signed a Harry Giles or had a bunch of first round picks, they could potentially pop. And I know they did get Christian Wood this year, so that is a guy who could potentially be pop. And they have a couple of guys like John Wall and DeMarcus Cousins who, if healthy, have been previous all-stars in this league, but that was a long time ago. And then I always said this with Miami too. They did the same thing. They traded their pick every year. They never had any young guys on that team. It was always, their bench was always guys like Mike Miller and Udonis Haslem and people like that, which is fine. But once Wade started hobbling around and wasn't quite the same player, they had no one to turn to like be like, well, maybe this guy could step up and do that. They just had role players that weren't good enough to take that next step ever in their career. And so and then when a guy like LeBron leaves, or when you're talking about trading a guy like James Harden, they have like no one to build around if they lose those guys. So
it basically has to be a fresh rebuild, or they have to literally do what the Heat did, which was develop and draft almost perfectly.
Right.
That, you know what I mean? And like, they landed Jimmy Butler, so that was like a big move. But like, they weren't even a playoff team last year, and then they get Jimmy Butler and they become a finals team, right? But part of that is like, they draft Bam Adebayo 13. He's already an all-star big and he's still young. They draft Tyler Hero 13th?
13th, yeah. I think.
Was Bam 14th? I forget.
Bam was 14. Yeah, Bam was 14.
I mix them up.
Mitchell was 13.
Yeah, Tyler Hero. Right, he's looking like a great pick at 13, right? He's becoming very overrated, in my opinion, right now, but still a great value pick at 13. Duncan Robinson, undrafted two-way player, becomes a really, really good role player for them. Kendrick Nunn, an undrafted two-way player, becomes a really, really good role player for them. That's the thing, is like, they didn't do that when they were in when they had LeBron, right?
Right.
If they did that when they had LeBron, find like unheralded G League guys to come in and be like a Duncan Robinson. I think Duncan Robinson is better now than like Mike Miller was during his tenure, like the last couple of years LeBron was in Miami. So that's the thing. It's like if they did that, they might have won that third championship. They might have beat the Spurs 2 years in a row instead of losing to the Spurs. That Spurs team was great, moved the ball really well, so it still would have been a tall task that, the Spurs definitely controlled that entire series, winning that championship, but it would have raised their ceiling. And then after LeBron left, they would have had guys that could potentially like take on a little bit more responsibility and grow into that role because they're young, and then they would have still remained a playoff team instead of really struggling after that. So yeah, I mean,
and that's also why I'm not worried about Nas, because I mean, this is year 2 of a 4-year deal and we have him under control, so like it's not imperative that he shows something this year or does something this year. We can take our time and be patient with him, keep him on the roster. There's no need to like trade him or get rid of him, but like you potentially have a diamond in the rough there that once these other guys move on or get older, like he could step up and fill one of those roles. And if you keep developing that way, maybe he'd surprise and be like even better than some of those guys before him. And with his work ethic, like I think he could get there if he keeps trying. Hopefully his health issues subside and he can get back to actually playing. Yeah. But I'm stoked for the future of this team. Yeah.
Since we were just talking about Duncan Robinson, when Duncan Robinson was Nasir Little's age, he wasn't even a D1 player. He was like D2 or D3, right? This is Duncan Robinson's first year doing anything. He is older than Yusuf Nurkic. People think he's like 22. No, Duncan Robinson is 26. He's literally going to turn 27 this season. And he was nothing before this year. So like Nasir Little being 20, Nasir Little is 6 years younger than Duncan Robinson. This was Duncan Robinson's first year doing anything. And he was that type of diamond in the rough. Nasir has time. Simons has time. Like, there's no rush with these guys. So that's the thing is like once, maybe Rocco is 33 and declining or whatnot, then Nasir Little will be ready to step up and take his role because let me look at Covington's age. Covington's 29, right?
29 or 30. I think his birthday's today, actually.
Oh, is it? It actually is. Yeah, happy birthday to Covington. He's in his 30s now. So 4 years from now, 3-4 years from now, he'll be 33, 34, maybe at that point, Nasir Little has improved enough. Nasir Little would be 23, 24. Maybe at that point, Nasir Little has improved enough where it's like, okay, well, he can match Covington's production. Covington's up there in age, so we'll let Covington walk in free agency or whatever. They'll trade him and let Nasir step into that role. That's the thing. And Nasir would only be 23 still, 24 still. You know what I mean? So that's the thing is there's no rush with these young guys. Everybody like Simons won't play well for 4 minutes and everybody's screaming trade him, right? But you have guys that are legitimate NBA role players on good teams now who were D3 when they were Simon's age. You know what I mean? Like unrecognizable. Like Duncan Robinson, that's his story, and that's rare. Normally they're a lot higher ranked D1 players, whatnot, but still, that just shows you got to be patient with some of these guys.
And Trevin brings up a good point. So, like, let's say we traded Nas and Simons for, like, a decent veteran player. Like, he's not going to get many minutes on this team. Exactly. So you basically just wasted a chance at, like, even if it's a 10% chance they develop into, like, a good rotational player, you're still giving that up for someone who won't even play that big of a role on the team this year. So, like, there's no point in not just keep developing those guys that are locked up for multiple years past the season.
Like, that's the thing. I would only trade, like, those guys for a star because what's the point in getting a really good role player when you already have a bunch of really good role players? You don't need another one. That doesn't raise the ceiling on your team at all. That doesn't really increase your chances of winning a championship at all. So like a PJ Tucker, man, it's just like with the players we have now, I don't think PJ Tucker would really help this team. Last season, he would have helped this team a ton.
When's he going to play? Yeah. Like...
Yeah, but it's like this year, what, is he going to play over Melo? Is he going to play over Covington? Is Covington going to play more 3 so Tucker can play more 4? And are you going to cut Hood's minutes? Like, whose minutes are you going to cut there? That's the thing. No matter... If you trade for PJ Tucker, the only way it makes sense to trade Nasir and Anthony for PJ Tucker is if you're going to trade him. But you're going to have to cut somebody's minutes who's just as good as PJ Tucker, so it doesn't make your team better. That's the thing. So it doesn't make sense to to give up on guys that could develop into players that will actually help your team win for a veteran player now who's not going to really improve your team at all. That doesn't make any sense. So that's the thing. And honestly, that's probably the best level player that those guys could fetch, unless you threw in a bunch of firsts and threw in like a Zach Collins and traded for a star. But that's exactly my point. Like, yes, I would consider trading him for a star because it would actually upgrade the team now. But all the people that are saying, oh, just trade him, we just need to get rid of Anthony, we need to get rid of Zach, you're probably like, it doesn't make sense to trade him for a role player because it's not really going to help the team right now. Last season is a different case because we needed good role players. We didn't really have any. Now we have a bunch. So those types of trades, it kind of annoys me when I see Blazers fans throwing them out there.
Absolutely. I just want to acknowledge Kings 8. I like when fans of other teams come in here and they're cool and say nice things and aren't like a
trolling
troll.
us like always. Yeah.
Yeah. So he says, as a Kings fan, Giles will be a fan favorite, guaranteed. Good luck to you guys. So
he already kind of is.
Yeah, he already is. Yeah.
So everybody's loving him.
The game and everyone's.
Yeah. Appreciate it, man. Yeah, it's interesting to hear how Kings fans really, really like him. Why? Okay, so for the Kings fan, why did they give him up? What was the logic in that? Why didn't they bring him back? I do not understand that. I want to know if like Kings fans were really mad about that because dude, it just doesn't make sense. Why let him walk for nothing? And it wasn't like a Bogdanovich where he got offered, $18 million a year, $19 million a year. Like they had team option on him on a decent value contract for the next 2 years. He was still on his rookie contract. Or no, only next 1 year because he did miss his rookie season. So they could have brought him back next year at like $5-6 million a year. I don't know exactly what his rookie contract was, but instead they decided to let him walk. I don't understand that. It doesn't really make sense to me.
Yep.
Matthew, I'll respond to that after the stream. I'll respond to that comment. Jason Lee said, who's your superstar? There's really not any available right now, and I don't know who's going to be available at the deadline, so that's the thing. That's why I'm not even talking trades when I get asked it in mailbags. That's why we're not talking trades on stream. This is probably the longest we've gone without even discussing trades because I don't think it's likely we make a trade this year. We're going to have to stay under the tax, so we literally have to take back less money than we're trading out, because the only way we make a trade is if we trade a couple players for, as if we consolidate some of our depth, meaning we trade 3 players for 2 or 3 for 1 or something like that. So it's like the salary with us, really wanted to stay under the tax with how much money we're going to have to pay the team next year. We're probably going to have to go into the tax. We don't want the repeater tax kicking. It limits our trade options in that regard, and what also limits our trade options is the fact that a PJ Tucker wouldn't really help us, whereas in previous years we would have loved to get a guy like that. So that also limits the potential trade. So it really just comes down to if we're going to make a trade, it's probably going to have to be for a fringe all-star, or else it doesn't make a ton of sense. And there's really none available superstar-wise other than James Harden, but I don't really want him. I did that whole video on it. And other than that, who else is available? There's really nobody else available, and we don't know who's going to be available. So that's why I'm not even talking trades, and that's why I'm not even, naming names or anything.
And just for the record, the Blazers are hard capped this year because we use the full mid-level exception. And that doesn't really affect us at all right now since we're not in the tax. But it would absolutely come into play even if we did want to trade for a guy like James Harden, because we'd have to trade at least 3 or 4 guys out, and James Harden makes more than those 4 guys put together. So we'd be right up against the tax line and have to sign 3 players because you have to have 14 players on your roster. And most of those scenarios, and no matter who you combine, it doesn't equate to having enough cap room unless you start talking about including Nurk along with CJ, and at that point it's okay, now we're getting a little overboard here.
Yeah, because our salary is $131.5 million right now. Correct?
Yeah, I think it's right at 132, and the luxury tax is 132.6 or something like that. Yeah.
The tax apron, which is basically the hard cap, is at 139, right?
Yeah, just under. It's 138.7 or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So we can't. Our salary literally can't go past the tax apron, the hard cap. It can't go past $138.7 million. Like, if we were making a trade and it would have put our salary past that, or we didn't have enough money left to sign the minimum number of guys we have to have on a roster, then the NBA literally would not put that trade through. Because it's literally using the full mid-level exception hard caps you at that $138.7 million number or whatever it is. We use the full mid-level exception on Derrick Jones Jr., so that contract makes it so that our salary can't go past that amount. So yeah, that's the thing, is like, even if we had an all-in trade and we're saying, screw it, let's go into the tax, we couldn't go far into the tax because we're hard capped. So that's another reason why trades are limited this season. Anish says, if the Warriors have a bad season, would you trade for Oubre? Here's my thought on that. If they have a bad season, a big part of that would likely be Oubre not playing well. Mm-hmm. And in that case, I probably wouldn't. So the only way I'd consider a trade for Oubre is if he's playing well, but if he's playing well, that Warriors team is probably in contention for a playoff spot and they don't trade him. The only way I could see like Oubre potentially being an option is if like Steph Curry gets hurt, somebody else gets hurt, but even then, like, Oubre is still pretty young and fits their like timeline the next couple of years, so I don't think Oubre will be an option this season.
And I like Rocco better than Oubre on our particular team with our system anyway.
Yeah, and I mean, like, bro, if Derrick Jones Jr. can hit threes at 35%, I don't really see what Oubre brings that he doesn't outside of, like, some shot creation ability. But Oubre's defense isn't as good as Derrick Jones Jr. So it's like, shooting-wise, Oubre is a little bit overrated. Let me look up his stats. I believe he's a career 34% three-point shooter, which, you know, he did shoot better last season. Last season he shot 35%. But Oubre is a career... No, let me see here. Oubre is a career 33% three-point shooter. Last season he shot 35%, but no season before that did he shoot over 34%, right? So if Derrick Jones Jr., I think there's a chance he becomes like a 34% three-point shooter. Oubre's shooting isn't really any better than his. Derrick Jones Jr. is a much better defender than Kelly Oubre. Kelly Oubre is kind of averages, maybe a little bit above average. There's areas he's good in. There's areas he really struggles in. I think his defense is a little overrated. So, like... What, does he replace Derrick Jones Jr. and you replace a defensive guy like Derrick Jones Jr. with a guy who can like do more off the dribble? That's not really what we need. We already have guys that could do stuff off the dribble and score off the dribble and create shots. We need those defensive pieces. So that's where it becomes like, honestly, believe it or not, like I'm not super high on Kelly Oubre, and I don't even know, like, if Kelly Oubre didn't take a step up this season, I don't know how much I'd want him over Derrick Jones Jr. Like, I'd probably still be higher on Kelly Oubre, but not enough where it justifies making a trade, you know, because it wouldn't help the team enough. It wouldn't improve us enough to give up the assets we'd have to give up in order to get Kelly Oubre, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I didn't... I was on board with trying to get Oubre in the past, but... I don't know. I guess with our new system, but he's not as good of a cutter as Derrick Jones Jr. So if we're gonna play different, like I like Derrick Jones Jr. more than Oubre, and Oubre was also terrible shooting from the corners. So if you make him a spot up shooter, I don't really like him in that role either. And I think Golden State's gonna kind of find that out. But yeah, I mean he's decent on defense too, but. Yeah, I'm not a fan of that.
Somebody brought up Derrick Rose. We don't need Derrick Rose either because Gary Trent Jr. is our backup guard. CJ's the point guard with the bench unit. Dame's the point guard. Every other whenever Dame's in the game, he's the point guard. CJ is probably going to be staggered and be the backup point guard. That leaves about 25 minutes per game at the backup two for Gary Trent Jr. And he should get all those minutes. Like if you trade for Derrick Rose, like what? Are you going to play Derrick Rose 12, 13 minutes a game? But that defeats the purpose of even trading for him. So you'd have to give him like 20 to 22 minutes, which means you'd have to play Dame with Derrick Rose. And that combination I don't like. I don't think it's a good fit. I don't think Derrick Rose is a good fit next to Dame. And that would take away some of the backup 2 minutes. CJ would be playing 35 minutes a game at the 2 since Derrick Rose would have the backup role. So basically you'd have to play Gary Trent Jr. at the 3, and then whose minutes do you cut? Rodney Hood's? You get players out of position, the fit's worse, and then you cut a guy like Rodney Hood's minutes to bring in Derrick Rose with all those downgrades. Like, yes, Derrick Rose is a better player, but the fit's worse, so it doesn't justify even looking at that, even if it was just bringing him in general. Like, if we could bring him in general, I honestly wouldn't even really care to, just because like you'd have to play him 20 minutes a game. You know what I mean? He deserves 20 minutes a game just based off his individual talent, but it doesn't make sense on our team.
And Blockboy keeps bringing up DJ Augustine. See, a guy like that, though, I would rather let CJ, even if CJ is not the best facilitator, I'd rather him just play 12 minutes a game at the backup point guard and, have to kind of fudge through that. And, I mean, it's worked fine in the past. CJ hasn't, to his credit, too, he hasn't really had the best lineups to play with in the second unit either. So I think I want to give him a chance to prove once he has a better lineup, like when he starts without Dame, he's shown plenty of times that he can be a facilitator. So, like, if you all of a sudden you have Melo in with him in the second lineup, you have a guy like Giles who's very versatile. You have Hood who can score the basketball.
A good roll man and finisher like Kanter, that's another guy in there. Trent, Yeah,
so at least give him a chance to, because in the past, it's been, oh crap, I got to take over or score, and that hasn't always worked out with our bench unit. But I'd much rather have that for 12 minutes a game than bring in a guy who is going to expect minutes and need minutes, and then not be happy if he's not playing a lot. But I think if it doesn't work out with CJ, that's why we left enough room under the tax, and we have a spot open for the buyout market. So you added a guy like Trey Burke did with Dallas last year, and you just bring in a guy like that, and off the buyout market, they're not necessarily expecting to come in and start or play big minutes off the bench or anything like that. So then you just give him a role if we need a facilitator off the bench, and we just work it that way. If obviously if Dame or CJ gets hurt, we would need a backup point guard on this team because no one else,
honestly,
as evidenced by the preseason games. I don't really like anyone else running the point there, but
well, here's the thing. Giles can handle, if Giles is our backup center, he can take a little bit of that pressure off of CJ in terms of, like, honestly, even bringing the ball up. Because, like, bro, Giles can bring the ball up against the center. And if they try and pressure, he can make the right pass out of it, and then we can attack 4-on-3. So that's the thing, is, like, Giles is a backup center. I like that role with, like, CJ as the backup point because Giles could take some of that passing, playmaking responsibility off of CJ. I think CJ can handle it. I agree with you. It's just like I'd rather have CJ as the backup point and play Gary Trent Jr. and Rodney Hood and all those guys than to cut one of those guys' minutes to play CJ all the time as the shooting guard in order to play a guy like DJ Augustine at the backup point. You know what I mean? So it basically just comes down to that. Laker Nation said, y'all needed someone like Jeremy Grant to compete with us. Well, Robert Covington is a better version of Jeremy Grant, so I guess we're going to beat you guys then in that case. Because Jeremy Grant is not as good as Robert Covington, and that's who we went out and got. So that's a win. Especially the price tag is a definite win, paying Robert Covington $11-12 million compared to Jeremy Grant for $20 million. No, thank you.
Absolutely.
But
I think the Pistons are going to find that out too.
Let me say this. Blockboy says, nah, you're too in love with Giles off 2 preseason games against the Kings. Giles ain't bringing the ball up. I'm not just basing this off 2 preseason games against the Kings. Let me just say that. Like, I'm not even really going to get into it because we talked about them a lot. But I'm not just basing that off of 2 preseason games with the Kings. Honestly, that's the one thing we haven't really seen during the preseason is we haven't seen a ton of Giles' passing and playmaking. Last season for the Kings, he showcased that tremendously. So I'm basing it off of more than just a couple preseason games.
Yep.
But here's the thing: is like Giles. You don't want him bringing the ball up against a point guard, right? So that's why it's like everybody thinks about like, oh, whoever brings the ball up needs to bring it up against a point guard. No, Giles can bring the ball up against the center. 100% can bring the ball up against the center. And if he gets pressed, like he's not going to be the type of guy to break it. But if he gets pressed, he's like 6'10", 6'11", 7 feet. I don't know his exact height. He's tall, so he can make the pass out of that to a guard like a CJ who can then bring the ball up if they press. And honestly, we could punish teams for pressing, so teams probably wouldn't in that situation. And Giles could grab the ball and push the ball up and bring the ball up and handle the ball in that regard.
And we're getting Trent a little bit of experience last game, bringing the ball up a little bit. But Melo can obviously bring the ball up. He's not incapable ball handler. And Hood can definitely grab the ball and dribble the ball up the court. And all those guys are decent shooters too. So, you've seen in the past, like last year, CJ is playing in the second unit with like Mario Hazonia, and the years before that, Evan Turner, and like so you have a guy who can handle the ball and take some of that point guard pressure off of him, like we're talking about with Giles and some of those other guys, but they can't shoot, so it like kind of limits what you can do on offense with those guys. But now he's got four guys with him if Giles is that guy in the second unit, where all of them can dribble the ball up the court. So it's not like Giles is going to be the secondary playmaker the entire time we have the second unit in the game. It's more like he could just do it sometimes, and Melo can do it sometimes, and Hood can do it sometimes. It just takes the pressure off of anyone having to be that main focus.
Yeah, and that's the thing is if you're running transition, any of those guys can push the ball in transition at least. So, that's the thing is you. Giles is just another guy that can handle the ball compared to like a plotting center who can't dribble. You know what I mean? So that's the difference there. And that's bro. If you guys have only seen Giles play based off the 2 preseason games, go watch some of his highlights from last year and some of the passes he made, because he hasn't really showcased that yet. I think he is equal to Nurkic as a passer. I think he's equal. He hasn't. I don't know. He hasn't really done it yet. He doesn't really look to pass as much as Nurkic does, but some of the passes Giles can throw are rare for a big, and it's some of the unique passes that Nurkic can throw. You know, the low skipping bounce passes on the money, hitting guys in stride. Like just go watch if you haven't seen it. Like he is legitimate as a passer. You can have your debate on whether or not Nurkic or Giles is the better passer. That doesn't really matter to me. The point is, both those guys can really pass the ball. Giles can really, really play make, and he hasn't really showed that yet.
Light it for a sec. Yeah. I'm excited about this team, man.
Yeah.
I know people are kind of down that we lost last night, but
people are going to overreact to one preseason game all the time. Like, it's just the way it is. Somebody asked, I forget.
We started CJ Ellaby and Kelvin Blevins in the second half of that game. Like, just calm down a little bit.
Yeah. So here's the thing. Here's the question. I forget who asked it, but somebody asked, okay, so if Melo's the backup 4, if Hood's the backup 3, if Trent's the backup 2, CJ's the playing backup point, where's Collins going to go? Assuming like the center is going to be Kanter or Giles. Dude, I don't think Collins is going to get minutes when he comes back. I don't.
They might just sit him out for a while.
That's tough, man. Like, where does he get minutes from? Like, he gets minutes if Melo rests, maybe, but it's going to be a struggle.
He is our best bench hype man, so that's a good role for him.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough, man. It's like he's the starting 4 and then gets hurt right at the start of the season. It's like, are we lagging a little bit?
We were earlier. I think we're okay right now.
Yeah, my preview will just randomly stop and show that buffering, you know, that little circle. It spins around. I hate that circle. But, so it's tough because he basically loses not only his starting force job to injury, but also any playing time potentially, which is tough, especially for a young guy who's like maybe ready to break out. And now what? It's going to be a struggle for minutes, but we're trying to contend, you know. If we were a team that like wasn't a playoff team, then Collins would definitely play and should definitely play because he's young and we're trying to develop. Problem is we're trying to win. Like this more than any other season, I feel like we're trying to win and we're screw developing guys, right? Giles would be awesome to develop, you know, if we keep him long term. Thing is, he's already developed enough to help us win right now, which like Collins can definitely make a good impact. It's just like you got a ton of talent in the front court. That's the thing. Collins could definitely be, you know, a first or second big off the bench for maybe even a contending level team, but most contending level teams don't have the front court depth we do. That's the issue.
And once again, we have Nurk who's had injury problems, Giles has had injury problems, Collins has had injury problems. It's not necessarily the worst idea to maybe say, okay, this game, we've played, 3 games in 6 days or whatever. So one of these games, Nurk, you're not going to play. One of these games, Giles, you're not going to play. One of these games, Collins, you're not going to play. And kind of just do the rotations that way. Obviously, we don't have to worry about that for the first month. So a lot of this, like Stotts said in the original quote we talked about, to bring this full circle, that it'll play itself out. Whether if Giles is playing so good, obviously no one will care if Collins doesn't have a starting job or his backup job or whatever. And then no one will care that Kanter's not getting minutes if Giles is showing out. Or if Kanter's showing out, then and Giles struggles, then people will say it's fair to play Kanter over him. And then maybe you give Collins a chance if Giles or Kanter isn't doing well. So
Yeah.
I think it just depends on how they're doing. It depends on matchups. Yeah.
Just, bro, I couldn't imagine this preseason and like the rotation to pay if you also had Collins in the equation.
I know, it'd be crazy.
That would be even more messy. That'd be insane. But like Giles, the first two preseason games looked better than Collins has ever done and looked in the NBA. You know what I mean? Even in preseason games, like Collins ain't doing half the things Giles did in some of those games. You know, I mean, yeah. But I mean, like Collins does little things and provides rim protection and can knock down the three, where Giles hasn't really done anything as a 3-point shooter. So like there are some things that Collins does better, which is why I'm not sitting here like, yeah, Giles 1,000,000% over Collins. You know, I think Giles is the better player, and you know, they were in the same draft class, similar age. I think Giles is the better player now. Probably he definitely has the higher ceiling too. So you know, I favor Giles more. And Zach Collins is my guy. He's a Gonzaga guy. But you know, I'm not completely writing off Collins at this point.
See, this is where they differ for me. Giles has the skill set to be a star level player, which Collins does not.
What's the skill set plus the fluidity and like just the agility that he has?
Right, exactly. Like kind of like a light KG type player. And whereas Zach has the skill set of a Rocco type, where your ceiling is probably elite role player, glue guy type player. And so it's hard to say that one of those is more important for our team, because we've talked about how important guys like Rocco are for this team, and not necessarily needing a player who needs the ball or can create and stuff like that. But like I think there's a room for both of them is what's good about it. And you know, you could always, you know, if Hood's limited on his minutes, you could probably Rocco a little more at the 3, and you know, have Melo and Collins be your backup 4, Melo and Giles be your backup 4, or whatever. There's different ways we could figure that out if it becomes a problem. But I'm glad we're talking about that problem versus like, oh man, we're gonna have to start Anthony Tolliver at center this game and stuff like that. You know?
Yeah. Thank goodness. So. Yeah, I mean, just wait till midseason when it's, oh, who should be our starting center, Nurkic or Giles? I wonder if there's any chance that actually becomes a debate amongst Blazers fans. Because, man, like, Giles' ceiling is as good as Nurkic's. You know what I mean? That's the crazy part about it, is, like, that's the only guy on our team that I could see potentially making there even be a little bit of a debate. Like, I'd probably still just say, like, nah, Nurkic is our starting center. Like, pretty set on that, but... You know, and if Giles gets that good, maybe he becomes the starting 4 and you slide Rocco down to the 3, because I think Giles would have to hit 3s in order to like really make that an argument. But at that point, if he can hit 3s, he works as a 4. So like, I don't think that will be an argument. It's just kind of curious, like, man, how good could he be? Like, could we actually have? I don't know, man. It's just. I can't picture. For the past 2-3 years, I can't picture anybody threatening Nurkic's starting spot. But now it's like you could have a backup center that's like maybe potentially a top 3 backup big in the league, maybe the best. Like, he has the potential to be the best big in the league. Like, I'm not saying he is that, but like just his talent level is legitimate. So, and see, here's the thing is, like, I say something like that and you have people like Rod who be like, Giles would not be the starting center, remove head from ass. I never said he's going to be the backup center. I never said that he should be the backup center. I was just wondering if some fans might start debating that, just if Giles really plays up to his potential, because his potential is enormous.
And so for Blockboy saying y'all are oversold on Giles, watch games, not just highlights or whatever. Okay, so he's going into his 4th season. He didn't play a single game his first season. He's played like sporadic minutes the next 2 seasons. I don't know what the heck the Kings are doing. I mean, they've proven since I think it's either 2006 or 2004 is the last time they made the playoffs, so they don't know what they're doing. So I wouldn't put too much stock into his inconsistencies. The problem is he hasn't been able to be relied on to be healthy. So when you come to an argument on whether he should be our long-term starting center if he shows out, then you're talking about putting your faith in a guy who has had multiple knee surgeries. And when it comes to the Blazers, that's kind of a cringe.
Granted,
thought.
Granted, Nurkic just had his injury issues too, you know.
He definitely has as well. And that's why it's good to have both of them. And I think as long as both of them are getting minutes and stuff and keeping each other fresh, I think it'll be a good problem to have. But we're not saying, and I don't want to speak for you, but I'm pretty sure you're not saying that Giles is going to be the MVP this season or whatever. Like people are taking that from you. We're just saying there's a reason he was the number one recruit out of college and thought to be the next Kevin Garnett and that kind of stuff. So he does have that in there somewhere. It just hasn't manifested to the court yet in the NBA.
Here's what's funny about things is if I wasn't excited enough, I'd be labeled as a hater, right? But if I'm too excited, I get this type of reaction. You know what I mean? Like it's always generally one or the other, I feel like. But no, I mean, I'm not saying I'll ever say he starts over Nurkic. If he becomes that good, he should start over Derrick Jones Jr. because at that point you play Giles at the 4 and Rocco at the 3, and you take Derrick Jones Jr. out of the starting lineup. Like that would be the debate there. You know what I mean? So, but like that's the thing is just like if we're not excited enough, you have people like talking trash to us saying we're haters. If we're too excited, you have people saying stuff like get off the Giles bandwagon, you're a little overexcited and stuff like that. So that's the thing is like you can never satisfy everybody doing this, and that's what I've learned is either way you're either a hater or you're too excited. But I'm super excited, man, and I was super excited when we signed him. I said this is an A+ signing, great flyer. Like I loved Giles' game before this, and I've seen Giles play before this. It's not just these 2 preseason games. It's not based off that, but some guys you can just watch and tell that they have it. And Giles is one of those guys you just have to watch him on the court for a little bit, and you can tell that he has it. Just the way he moves, the fluidity, the skill set, all that.
And this is like the guy you've been waiting for to sign as a fringe level player versus the Nick Stauskas and the Mario Hezonja type.
Yeah, I've complained about our Flyers are Nick Stauskas, Mario Hezonja, and I've pointed out look at the Heat. They signed Duncan Robinson and he was nothing, and then he's turned out to be great. I wish we signed better Flyers when they're unheralded projects and then turned them into good players. Thing is, Giles isn't like a Duncan Robinson. Giles, I think, was already a decent NBA player. He was a flyer because it's just a minimum contract, but he was the perfect flyer because he's already proven some of the things that a lot of other flyers haven't. He is. I don't know if you can get a better flyer than a Harry Giles, a more talented flyer than a Harry Giles. That's why I was shocked that we were even able to take a flyer on him. I was shocked when we signed him, just because I thought he was going to get $5-6 million a year somewhere, and at least a 2-year contract with a player option at least. So I was shocked.
And Anisha's saying we're acting like the Warriors fans with Andrew Wiggins right now. Okay, so he said they're the same age. That's wrong. Wiggins is 25. Giles is 22. So that's 3 years different. Wiggins has already played 6 seasons in the NBA, and Giles has played 2 since he sat out his first year. So he's going into his 3rd year. Wiggins is going into his 7th year. So that's not accurate at all to compare those two. Wiggins has had every opportunity to play starter role for major minutes and be the guy on a team. Yeah, whereas Giles hasn't come close to the opportunities Wiggins had.
Listen to this. Wiggins has played 454 games in his career. He has started 454 games in his career. He has averaged 35.8 minutes per game. He's had every opportunity. You couldn't have a worse comparison than that.
And once again, we're not saying he's going to be all these things. We started off this thing by saying he might not even get minutes over Kanter, at least at the beginning of the season. So, yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, Westbrook took a flyer on Seth. Seth was a great flyer, but Seth was more he was a good NBA player, then got injured and was out for a year, and that killed his value, and then he was, bounced back to that, whereas, Giles is, opportunity,
So we used all the portion of the. Are we lagging?
We're lagging a little bit. We're fine though.
We did use all the portion of the mid-level exception that we could on Seth Curry, so it was basically like a mid-level exception signing, even though he signed less than the mid-level exception because we used part of it to sign Gary Trent. Otherwise, Gary Trent would have been a free agent this summer with we would have had early bird rights, but we would have perhaps lost him this summer. So it's probably good, and then we would have been over the cap to have to keep him and all that stuff. So good hindsight by Olshey to use part of that mid-level exception back 2 years ago on signing Gary Trent, so we had his full bird rights next offseason.
Yep, 100%. So anyway, we're going to wrap up the stream. This has been a fun stream. We will be live on Wednesday with the post-game show after that Nuggets game. And then Thursday, we will be live here again at 9 p.m. With another Blazers Uprise live. And then on Friday, we will have another post-game stripping it up. As we head into the season, very excited to see what this team can do once the game starts. Once the games matter, especially because you got a lot of guys just kind of going through the motions right now, and I really want to see what this team can do. So anyway, thank you guys for tuning in. I did drop a mailbag earlier today if you want to go watch it. YouTube's starting to lag out and stuff, so this is the perfect time to sign off because Trevor said such an abrupt cutoff, but no, just flowing into it, and we're starting to lag, and normally it will have issues for 10 minutes, so might as well just tune out now. Thank you to everybody who supports us. It means a lot. Leave a like on this stream. It actually does help us out, and subscribe if you're new to this channel or haven't subscribed to Blazers Uprise Live yet. And until next time, hope you guys have a good rest of your Monday. As always, peace out. Go Blazers.